Welcome to Session 1. I am so excited to walk through the Bible with you and discover why this book is so relevant even today for your life. Before we can do that, though, we need to establish and understand what the Bible is and what story it's trying to tell. The Bible is far more than any book you'd find at the library. It's more than a book that you would find at a church or even a nightstand at a hotel. The Bible technically isn't even a book. The Bible is a collection of 66 books written over a span of 6,000 years. But when put all together, it tells one cohesive story. So what is that story? To summarize it in the simplest of terms, the Bible is the story of what God has done for mankind. It tells of how we broke our relationship with our Creator and what He's done to make things right. This story is unequivocally the most important story ever told. And it's just as important today as it was when it was written. So without further ado, let's jump right into the beginning. Genesis 1 verse 1. In the beginning, God. Stop right there. In just the first 4 words of the entire Bible, we're told who the main character of this story is. Life as we know it is God's story. We are merely extras in His narrative, if you will. This story we call life was initiated exclusively by the Lord. You might want to pay attention to that because we might be seeing that again in the future. God was here from the beginning, long before any of us or anything at all got here. He initiates all that is into being. The first 2 chapters of Genesis continue describing God's creation of the world. The skies, the various bodies of water, plant life, vegetation, all of the various animals. And finally, He creates mankind. Now, why did God create? Was He bored? Lonely, perhaps? No. God does not need anything. God creates because creativity is in His nature. God finished His work by creating His greatest treasure, man. Man was unique because unlike the rocks and the plants and animals that He created, God made man in His own image. Now, what does that mean? When God created mankind, He gave them a unique gift, free will. This means that humans have the unique ability to make decisions. We can either trust God as He would want us to do, or we can choose to ignore Him and do things our own way. To put others first, or to put ourselves first. This particular ability God gave us is what makes love possible. Adam and Eve lived in total paradise with their loving Creator. They had a perfect world, a perfect relationship with each other, and a God whom they had no reason to doubt or question. However, to ensure the possibility of love, there had to be a choice. God made it clear to Adam and Eve that they must not eat from the tree of the knowledge of good and evil. For when you eat of it, He said, you will surely die. Well, of course, we know how things turned out. Adam and Eve were deceived by the serpent and chose to be their own gods instead. And at that moment, 4 things occurred. Number 1, shame was brought into the world. Genesis 3 verse 7 says, Then the eyes of both of them were opened, and they realized that they were naked. So they sewed fig leaves together and made coverings for themselves. For the first time in history, shame was introduced to humanity. And not much has changed today. We do the same thing as Adam and Eve did, don't we? We've all experienced shame, but our natural inclination is to cover it up so that people can't see our true nature. We worry that if God and those we love really knew our hearts, they would reject us. This leads to number 2, fear. Genesis 3 verses 9 through 10 says, But the Lord God called to the man, Where are you? He answered, I heard you in the garden, and I was afraid because I was naked. so I hid. Instead of living in security and peace, we now live in fear. Number 3, separation from God. Genesis 3 verse 23 says, "So the Lord God banished him from the Garden of Eden to work the ground from which he had been taken." One thing we must know about God, and we'll learn about this more later on, is that God is holy. The word holy is defined as sacred or set apart from human infirmity, impurity, and sin. This doesn't put us in a good state. Why? Because we cannot stand in the presence of a holy God with the stain of sin on us. Number 4, death. I'm sure we all understand this. Death is the biggest result of the fall of man. Statistically, 100% of the human population has a 100% chance of dying. But it wasn't supposed to be this way. Our world and our lives are surrounded and impacted by these consequences every single day. To make matters worse, we're responsible for making it this way. Each one of us is guilty of having self-centered hearts. Mankind has been trying to get rid of evil all on its own since evil was first introduced. How do you think it's been going so far? I think it's safe to say that we've made a mess of this beautiful world and the life that God created for us. So with all of this information, what is the logical conclusion? We need to be saved. How does this happen? Well, that's what the rest of the Bible is all about.